So two long-term cycle planets, Saturn and Neptune, will enter Aries in 2025. One of the major stories of 2025 is that Saturn and Neptune will become co-present in Aries all summer. Upon Saturn entering Aries in May, Neptune enters Aries in March, but these planets enter Aries, meaning that Aries then becomes a major sign, a major theme, a major thematic kind of impulse of 2025. Aries being, initiation. It's a cardinal sign, it's fire. So we're talking about action, power, force. We're talking about the self. We're talking about independence and maverickism and, breaking free into an identity of selfhood that is based on, the power of the individual. This is a primary theme of 2025, and I want to talk about it here as we prepare for 2025 all month in December, doing as much as we can to get ready for next year. And astrologically speaking, that means breaking down these cycles that will arrive next year to try to understand how our years will go and to plan our years. They perfect their conjunction in February 2026. So it's not until then that the actual aspect becomes perfect, but that's sometimes less important than when they're very close or when do they share a sign. And with that viewpoint, July of 2025 becomes the most fascinating month maybe, where the planet Neptune and Saturn will get within 12 degree minutes. Neptune will be in 2 degrees Aries, Saturn in 1 degrees Aries, and they get within that 12 degree minute range, very tight co-presence in Aries. And so everything that people are talking about with Saturn and Neptune meeting actually comes online pretty strongly here in 2025. And so in some ways there's really no difference. Now we know Saturn has to go back to Pisces, Neptune goes back to Pisces. So in that sense we have to finish out those Piscean stories. But we're here in 2025, in summer 2025, 17 July, 12 degree minutes, they begin separating on 17 July, and then we have to wait until next year when we get the re-entry of Saturn and Neptune into Aries, and then that conjunction in February. And so this is one major reason why 2025 becomes a year of major initiation, of beginning new things, of newness in the reality, both collective and very likely interpersonal, and in your life and in my life. It's very much new energies and new movements and new endeavors coming online here, with the cardinal activation as a primary theme of the year 2025. Aries, again, is a cardinal sign. It's primary, meaning it's first. It's the first time that the sun, at the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, where the sun now has more light than less light. After the spring equinox, the sun now has more light than less. So it's an initial concept, or a first. At the summer solstice, it's the first time that the sun will then start losing light after the summer solstice, right? So it's a pivot in terms of the seasonal activation in the northern hemisphere. And then the fall equinox and the winter solstice are the same, where we get with the light, which is so primary to the day. I mean, some of you right now, you're going to go outside. It's getting dark real early. I just saw someone on Instagram talking about Scotland, 3 p.m. and it's dark. And so light is essential to how we function. We need light to be out and to see things. A lot of business activity relies on light. Cardinal signs are about the changing of light in the reality, and these pivot moments where we enter into a new proportional phase of light versus dark. And so they're primary in that sense. Essential, core, foundational, all of these words can be ascribed to cardinal energy, and 2025 is a cardinal year, a year of great cardinal initiation. Particularly what we're looking at here is Neptune and Saturn and Aries. So I want to quote Dane Rudhyar when we start talking about Aries. Dane Rudhyar, humanist astrologer, fascinating 20th century, New Age astrology, something like this, but symbolic, very sensitive to the meaning of the signs and exploring deeply the symbolism of the meanings of signs, particularly in the book, The Pulse of Life, one of my favorite books from Dane Rudhyar. He writes about Aries: piercing through the crust of the soil which the melting snow softened, the sprouting seed forces its life into the light of the sun. So we're forcing, that's an Aries keyword, into that sun to get that solar light and that power of the sun. He continues, the new star asserts his right before the footlights of the human consciousness. Henceforth, the show will be his. I love this writing because it evokes some of these themes of Aries, that here I am, it is me, I have a right to be here, and I will be doing this. Aries is ruled by Mars, the domicile lord, and so we have notions of warfare and fighting. Neptune rules beliefs, so we're like fighting for our beliefs here with Neptune and Aries. fighting for the space to be oneself. And that's where you see Rudhyar talking about forcing out of the seed sprouting and forcing out. And so that's another quality of Aries, is the idea of forcing out through the passions, fighting for what's ours, fighting for our selfhood, you know, asserting our will. Being assertive might be a psychological expression with Aries. And one I've been liking recently, we don't need to wait for orders from headquarters. You are the headquarters. You are the assertive decision maker in your own world and in your own life. And so that's a major, again, theme or tonality of the year 2025. Neptune entering Aries in March, Saturn joining Neptune in May, and then the co-presence with Saturn and Neptune in Aries until 1 September when Saturn comes back into Pisces. And so I want to look at some of the history of this, just to ground into what may be coming online next year. One of the best things about astrology is we have cycles like this that have been in the past, and events happened there that have been written in history books that we can probably trust, right, somewhat recently. And so we have a direct connection to events that can help us make tangible or express how this symbolism wants to manifest. And the last time Saturn and Neptune were together in Aries was in 1702, March, until May 1704, and then December 1704 until January 1705. So we're basically looking at that period in 1702 to 1705. Themes from that time that I think are relevant and evocative of the larger symbol set. Queen Anne was crowned on the 23rd of April 1702, Queen of England. So shortly after she was crowned, a mere weeks later, on the 4th of May, she declares war. England formally declared war on France and Spain, marking the start of Queen Anne's War in North America. English, French, Spanish, Native American allies were all fighting here. So in effect, it was an American Civil War before the American Civil War, which also happened when Neptune was in Aries. It's a theme both of new frontiers, new boundaries. That's Saturn, that's Neptune. We're discovering the frontier and the boundary. It's the theme of war, fighting to assert the self. And we see that with Queen Anne's War. And Aries themes of new beginnings, you know, extending empire, right, into new frontiers or new lands, starting anew on this big, large continent that the European, you know, empires were salivating over and were fighting over to conquer and control. Right at the end of March, on the 30th, Neptune will enter Aries. Right in the aftermath of that, we got to pay attention because of how that's impacted North America. War erupting here. As an astrologer, I don't want to see it. I'm going to bring this back into more metaphor here so we can try to capture these symbols outside of kinetic war. How might this apply to our current time and not be some kind of kinetic blow off of a war? And again, we're talking about the beauty of astrology, the malleability of its symbols, the ability to imagine symbolic application outside of the histories that we bring into a moment and outside of what the textbooks might say about a symbol. We can reimagine symbols, we can play with symbols. But I want to come into the idea that we're in an age of air. So Saturn and Jupiter are conjoining in air signs now. Pluto is in Aquarius, an air sign. Uranus will be in Gemini starting in 2025 until 2033. It will be in this air sign Gemini. We have an air element that's dominant, which is technology, which is the mind, which is thought, which is idea. And so I am hoping that these wars that come online, these quote unquote wars that may come online, are not kinetic wars, but rather wars through the words and language and tech and thought and idea. And so we may be fighting over our ability to retain belief sets that we feel passionate about, right? Neptune and Aries, belief, passionate belief. Remember, Aries is the head in terms of the bodily assignations of the zodiac. And the sun, also a ruler of Aries, is the consciousness. It's the larger sense organ of the consciousness. So we may be talking about wars for the head, for the mind, wars for the consciousness, attention wars, using the digital technologies. And let's hope it's only that, you know, the so-called info war. Now, this is imperative no matter what is happening with the astrology, is that we have to pay attention to our perceiver. We perceive reality. We can control our perceiver. You know, you have the ability to let things in or not let things in. You can turn things off. You can curate effectively the words that come into your mind. You can curate the images that you take in. And I think that could be a big part of next year with Neptune and Aries, is this curation of the self, curation of what passions we want to instigate in ourself, because there will be this idea of a war for the head. You know, you see, don't lose your head, right? This is a common expression with people when they're angry. You say, don't lose your head. Well, that's very Mars and Aries and solar. Don't let your passions overtake you to where you're into some kind of forceful expression of those passions. And so we have things like the chips, the battle over the production of chips. We have things like AI and the LLM technologies, and who will control those. Battles over the regulation regime around the LLM technology. We have, the psyche of the collective, the body politic, the head of that body politic, which would be the belief set of the collective. I think that's really where we, go. And so thinking about how dominant social media is, there may be wars over who gets to publish or not publish, or any number of things like that. Certainly wars to inject belief into the collective, to ignite passion, I think will be a major theme in 2025. So you got to watch and protect, again, your zone or your sphere around you. Protect it from that undue influence by, forces that maybe might not have your best interests in mind. I want to come to 1967, and I'm going to be talking about this a lot here in December as I'm releasing videos about 2025, but Saturn in Aries, Jupiter in Cancer. What we will get in 2025 when Jupiter enters Cancer on 9 June UTC, we will have the resonance with this 3-month period of time. It's only 3 months. It's the only time we've had it in the last 100 years. With Saturn in Aries, Jupiter in Cancer. And that 3 months, I think, is a great preview for our future. It's a beautiful thing about astrology. Again, you can slice out this time. You can slice out these moments of history that speak directly when you use planets, and particularly long-term cyclic planets, to cordon off zones of time. And so this becomes 3 March 1967 until 23 May 1967. So the spring before the summer of love would be one way to talk about 2025. Starting in June and until Saturn re-enters in September, you get this resonance with the spring before the summer of love in 1967. Let's go through a few of the events there, because this could be a major preview. Why could this also be important? Well, Saturn and Jupiter are the great planets in ancient astrology. The ancient astrological texts only look at the 7 traditional planets. That's all that they had. Even some modern schools and modern systems are going to accentuate and center the 7 traditional planets. In fact, that's how I like to practice for a lot of my astrology. But these are the great planets in that system because they're the slowest moving. And in terms of the planetary spheres, those are the 2 closest to the heavens, and they move slow. So they set the table for reality, Jupiter and Saturn. And that's why the Jupiter-Saturn cycle can be quite instructive. I've seen it repeatedly, predicting themes that become relevant based on the last time they inhabited the same 2 signs or the time before. So we come to 3 March 1967 into 23 May 1967. On 25 March, spring mobilization to end the war in Vietnam, large-scale anti-war protests took place in New York City and San Francisco. 150,000 people in Central Park to the United Nations headquarters. So massive anti-war protests, which could be likely, right? We have 2 hot wars in the world that get a lot of media coverage, Ukraine, Palestine. As those wars maybe don't go away, we don't know what's going to happen, but if they do grow, more than likely are going to see massive anti-war protests continue, just like in 2024. They'll probably keep going if there's some major war event. God willing there isn't. God willing there isn't. But look for these kind of human mass movements to saying no, right? If it's cardinal signs, we're going to initiate to stop. We're saying no, don't do it, don't go to war. We're going to try to stop it with our passionate collective uniting, Neptune and Aries. On 4 April, Martin Luther King Jr. speaks out against the Vietnam War. He had his famous Beyond Vietnam speech at Riverside Church in New York City, condemning U.S. involvements in Vietnam and calling for social justice and peace. So again, it's around themes of war, which is Aries. And then you have Saturn in Aries, which is trying to mollify or restrict warfare, aka peace. And then you have the passionate expression of the strongly held belief. That would be the Neptune in Aries resonance, or just Aries. Aries is saying, this is who I am. And so people coming out and saying, this is who I am, no war. We're not gonna have war in my name would definitely fit with an Aries impulse. By the way, I see a lot of people talking about Mars and Aries or Aries energy as being some kind of violent or aggressive. I find that to be the opposite. I find Aries to be some of the calmest people I know because they know what it's like to fight. They're quite comfortable with themselves and their ability to assert, and there's no drama about it. They just say, nope, not going to do it, and they just take action. This isn't some kind of dramatic Mars, which Mars can be in some of the other signs. It's not as comfortable just asserting, initiating, and going. And so I think when you have Saturn in Aries, like this period in 67, these are people that are, taking a deep-rooted stand, a foundational stand on war, which in this case is they don't want to fight. And of course, this is my favorite example of this little period in 1967, Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Aries, and it's 28 April, Muhammad Ali refuses military service. Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, says, I'm not going to go to U.S. Army. And he cited religious and moral objections to the Vietnam War. There's that famous quote where he says, you know, my country wants to fight me. I'm not going to fight for my country and go kill other people. I have nothing wrong with the Vietnamese people. And he says, I'm not going to fight. So they stripped him of his boxing titles for that. And then he became a prominent figure in the anti-war movement. And that's how strongly held his belief was. Talk about Saturn in Aries. It's like, nope, I'm not going to do it, not going to fight. Saturn in Aries. And so I think 2025 is the year to get in the game in a major way, putting action that's based on your foundational belief sets and that's based on your kind of true self or your core belief self. You're going to be putting that on the line in 2025. You'll be taking action on the basis of who your true self may be, or having to hold tightly to strongly held beliefs. Again, Aries and Neptune and Aries. You know, the sacrifice or temporary suppression of personal desires to achieve a greater spiritual or collective goal. This might be a theme or delineation. Saturn is the authority figure, the structures of power in the hierarchy, the authority. Neptune might imply collective disillusionment with the government as it joins Saturn. And then you have these passions, passionate expressions of that disillusionment of the structures of power or the authority. You may have this idea of warrior for compassion or warrior to stop war, or the kind of, it's that Japanese deity that has the sword. I don't know the name in Japanese, but it's the compassion god that has a sword. And the notion is that sometimes you can be so compassionate and loving that you have to kind of fight for it or defend it with the power of, you know, saying no, or in this case, Saturn and Aries, saying, I'm not going to fight, we're not going to do it, no. And then personal sacrifice that may come as a result of speaking out. Like Muhammad Ali. And there's a whole thing about Jupiter and Cancer on that, and I'll just say it's the truth, wisdom, justice, and revelation around the core of the collective body, Cancer, the matrix of reality that we emerge out of. When Jupiter traverses Cancer, it's like this deep access to a strong sense of this is the nature of being. This is the, you know, I'm connected to this greater, you know, Mother Gaia, effectively, that we emerge from, and that we can stand in deep wisdom around that. I think Ali's statements are very much like that. He's like, I'm not going to go kill people. That would be Jupiter and Cancer. It's like the mothering energy, the nurturing energy, and centering that from a more profound place. Combined with Saturn and Aries, it's like then saying no to authority, you know, and resisting maybe what is perceived as the authoritarian impulse to kill in a way that is, you know, the banality of evil, I think is the quote. What is that? Hannah Arendt. Finally, the loneliness in pursuit of your ideals. Saturn, it can be isolatory. It can be the removal and isolation, more insular. And Neptune would be the yearning for these ideals. Both in Aries, it's like another maverick or independent energy. And so maybe there's some isolation here if you're called to stand in your own power and in your own truth and then act from that awareness. You know, we might be kind of walking our own way here a little bit, marching to the beat of our own drummer in 2025. And that'd be great. You know, just stand in your power and move into what you know is true for yourself and honor your beliefs and build out things that take time, lay those foundations, say no to what isn't serving you. And I think 2025 can go great for you to kind of attach to these themes of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. That's the video. Okay, take care out there. 2025, getting ready for it here in December, and I wish you the best 2025 you can have. That Aries activation, Saturn and Neptune there, saying no, passionately expressing your yearning. I think you'll do great. Follow me, like, subscribe as you see fit here. It's free to do, supports the channel. You can get me on Patreon. Got a lot of behind the scenes videos over there, a live stream, a weekly report that I make there. Follow me on Instagram, sjanderson233. And I wish you the very best. Talk very soon. Peace. Take care.